Can you tell where I keep a lot of my favorite books?
Hey guys, so a couple months ago, this cool girl named Laraine Brotista, link in the doobly-doo, she made this video about genre exploration and her favorite books in a lot of different categories, mostly because us avid readers, when somebody asks us, what's your favorite book, you don't really have an answer. You can't choose one above the hundreds of books that you've possibly read in your lifetime. And so she talked about her favorite books in a bunch of different genres, and I felt like that was perfect for me to do because I really wanted to do it. I thought it was a cool idea. So here is my response to her original video. The first one is The Great Good Thing by Roderick Townley. This is about a character in a book. So it's a book about a book, and the character, whose name is Sylvie, she lives out her life every time someone reads this book. So if the book isn't read, then she can kind of do whatever she wants, but as soon as the book is being read, she has to act out the story as it happens. I read this book multiple times as a kid. I had it read it to me. I'm pretty sure I read it myself. I just really, really loved the plotline. The second is Holes by Louis Satcher. I have talked about this book multiple times in other videos, so you can check those out for more details. Third is The Doll People by Anna Martin and Laura Goodwin. This is about a dollhouse that comes alive after the children leave the house, so the dolls have personalities and lives of their own, and it's sort of what happens when the humans leave. Fourth, Little House on the Prairie by Laura Ingalls Wilder. I read all of the books that she'd written when I was about 9 years old in 4th grade, and I loved them. I also read them even before then. I read this book multiple times, and I just thought the story was so cool. And then lastly for children's lit is the American Girl collection stories. This is Kit's specifically. I also have Kirsten's, but I read Molly's and I've read stories from other girls, but I just love these. And as far as I know, they're still pretty popular, so yay for American Girls. The first is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. I don't actually own this book because I borrowed Les's, but I do plan on getting it at some point. This was a fantastic book in every way possible. Second is The Mango-Shaped Space by Wendy Mass. This is about a girl who has synesthesia, I believe that's how you pronounce it, where she has colors that she associates with things like words and numbers and so on. And A Mango-Shaped Space is based on her cat, and he's called Mango not because he's an orange tiger kitty, but because he is, his aura, the color that she associates with him is mango. Third, The Holiday Series by Kate Can. Those are the colorful books right here behind me that you see in all my videos. I love these books. I'm pretty sure this one's my favorite, Mediterranean Holiday. I'm not entirely sure. Could be Grecian Holiday. It's one of the two. But it's basically these girls go on holiday in the summer with their families or with their friends, and it's just sort of the adventures that they have going on holiday in these different places. And they're just really, really good beach reads. And then finally there's Anna and the French Kiss by Stephanie Perkins. I liked this book a lot because I loved how the romances were portrayed. It wasn't one mushy-gushy romance. It was a bunch of different romances in different stages and just the trials and tribulations that they go through, and I just thought the story was very, very realistic. The first is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, of course. Loved this series, blazed through it my freshman year of college, and I really, really want to read them again. This isn't even my book, it's my sister's book, so I really need the box set trilogy. Second is the Gemma Doyle trilogy by Libba Bray. This is the first book, A Great and Terrible Beauty. I'm currently in the middle of rereading the third book. I like them that much that I read them again, and they're just fantastic fantasy stories in the late 1800s. They're, you know, historical fiction that talks about girls' boarding schools and sort of the culture of the time, but it also has this element of fantasy and magic mixed in. Lastly is Divergent. I don't have this right now because Les has it in Washington, D.C. I blazed through this book in no time because I thought the plot and the idea of the factions and setting in Chicago and just all of the characters were awesome. So yeah, top favorite of mine. First is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I read this my sophomore year of high school. It was one of those kind of like, you could choose from this pile of books, what do you want to read, and then you have to do something regarding that book, and so I picked this one. I remember reading it around Christmas, and not so much the actual storyline that I loved, it was how well it was written. I just really liked the prose of the book. This was not the copy that I read though. This is my mom's $1.50 copy from probably the 70s. The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I already did a whole video dedicated to this book, so you can definitely watch that for more details, but I reread it and I loved it even more. Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. I wasn't really sure if I was going to like this book because it's written in stream of consciousness, and sometimes that sort of writing just drives me up the wall, but I was really impressed with it in this book, and I liked how it was done, and I think that really, makes me understand why it's considered a classic. Lastly is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I want to read this book again. I read it for high school, and it was one of my top 3 favorite books that I read in high school. I loved it. The first is The Island by Victoria Hislop. I read this book with Les in our sophomore year of high school. It was kind of side reading. We just read it together out loud because we do that sometimes. And the story takes place in Greece, and it involves lepers, and it's a whole generational story, and we were so invested in the characters. Next is Saturday by Ian McEwan. I don't have this book because I read it in school, but Ian McEwan talks about how he likes to put his characters in really trying and troublesome situations to see how they'd come out of it, and Saturday was definitely one of those kind of books, kind of like Atonement is, and it was just fabulous. Next is The Hours. The Hours is sort of a companion novel to Mrs. Dalloway, Virginia Woolf, all that stuff, because it covers 3 women in 3 different generations, one of those women being Virginia Woolf. They made a movie out of it. The movie is very good too, but the book by Michael Cunningham is well worth a read. Then lastly is One Day by David Nichols. I remember springing out of bed when the ending happens. For those of you that read the book, you know what I'm talking about. What I really loved about this book was the concept of following a couple every year on the same day and just seeing how their relationship and their lives changed. It was a really excellent way to portray someone's life without making the book 1,000 pages long. The first, as you might have guessed, is Sarah's Key by Tatiana de Rosnay. I love this book so much, and I've talked continually about how much I love it. It is a World War II story. It takes place in France, and it talks about the lesser-known deportation of the Jews in France. It's just, Between Shades of Grey, which is another World War II story. That's by Ruta Sepetys, and this one takes place in Lithuania, and it's about the deportation of Lithuanian Jews and how they had to go to Siberia and how horribly tough it was for them, and also coming back and not having their same houses anymore because they were taken away from them. Just sort of the overall struggle, of course, but it's told from the perspective of a 15-year-old girl, so that makes it much easier, I think, for some people to relate to. Then there's The Things They Carried. This is a Vietnam War story. I put this in historical fiction because it's partly based on his experience in Vietnam and it's partly fiction. So it has, real details I'm sure that he experienced, but there was also probably some things that he elaborated on that didn't necessarily happen. But if you're looking for a really good war story that shows inner psychological battle and things and how different people react to war, then you need to read The Things They Carried. Lastly is Skeletons at the Feast by Chris Bojalian. This is another World War II story, but it's told from the other side. It's told from Nazi sympathizers and sort of the backlash that they faced after things started to wind down and the Nazis started to lose the war. You see sort of why they thought what they thought, and also how they had to deal with things after the war ended, how their lives changed as well, because of course people were very angry with them. First is Bubbles Unbound. This is part of the Bubbles series. It's in the same vein of the Stephanie Plum sort of thing, where it's this kick-ass woman who you wouldn't normally think of being somebody who would solve crimes, but it's really hilarious and a totally good beach read. Second is the Millennium Trilogy. This is the first book, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I very recently finished this as part of the Booktube-a-thon, and it is a fantastic series. If you can get past the first kind of prologue, first chapter of this book, then you are golden, because it is amazing. It will totally suck you in. There's so much stuff going on that you won't be able to put it down. Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. I read this book in about 6 hours, and yes, it's not very big, but it is still one of those psychological thrillers that just sucks you in, and you think you know the ending. You think you do. You're gonna read it and you're gonna say, I know the ending. but you don't, trust me. The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold. A lot of people have a love-hate relationship with this book, but I really, really liked it. I thought it was beautiful, just well written, but also a very, very dark story at the same time. The movie doesn't quite do it justice, so if you've seen the movie and you're debating whether or not you want to read the book because you weren't thoroughly impressed with the movie, read the book. It'll definitely sell it for you. And then lastly is In the Woods by Tana French. This is a book that I read in under 24 hours, albeit I had a lot of free time because I was on vacation, but it takes place in Ireland and it is such a fantastic psychological thriller. This little kid is found in the woods with like all of his friends are gone and he's like so traumatized that he can't even talk and explain what happened, and then it kind of flash forwards to time after that and figuring out what happened, and it's just all so good. The first is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. I read these in high school. There are 5 in the series, but my favorite is definitely the first one. I also saw the movie, which is really hilarious as well, but the book is great too. I mean, it's just a funky story about the demolition of Earth to make way for a super intergalactic highway. And the, things that stem from that, of course. I also decided to pick A Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin just because I have dedicated so much of my time to reading this series, and this is my favorite book in the collection so far because of all the awesomely crazy things that happen in this book. Lastly, I'm sure some of you are wondering when the heck this was going to come into play. I decided to stick Harry Potter in the science fiction and fantasy genre just because I don't really think it's children's lit solely, because adults read it as well. This needs no explanation. First is Harry, A History by Melissa Anelli. I listen to Pottercast, still do, and she's one of the people on that podcast, but she wrote this book which sort of chronicles the development of the Harry Potter fandom, wizard rock bands, LeakyCon, and all the other cons that they have for Harry Potter, the midnight releases, just all of the excitement and the awesome community that has sprung up around this book. The Lost City of Z by David Gran. It takes place in the Amazon. It mirrors both the, I believe, like 1930s World Geographic Society and present day, and the search for the Lost City of Z, and how so many people have disappeared looking for this place, and sort of now that they have modern technology, will they be able to find it? It is a really, really gripping read. Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer. I read this book this year. It is my favorite book I have read this year so far. I have an entire video where I rave about this book, so feel free to watch that if you want more details, but it talks about the 1996 Mount Everest disaster. Jon Krakauer was there himself, and it's his point of view, and it is amazing. Lastly is Wild by Cheryl Strayed. She decided to hike the Pacific Crest Trail, which is a trail that is over 2,000 miles long, stretching from the border of California and Mexico all the way up to Washington and Canada. She didn't hike the entire thing, but she hiked a large portion of it with absolutely no experience. She had no idea what she was doing, and it was completely irresponsible for her to do it, but at the same time, it makes for a fantastic story. Kind of embarrassingly, I don't own any of them because I borrow them from the library or other people, but the first one is The Lost Girls. I read this past winter, and it's about 3 friends who just basically drop everything that they're doing, their jobs, and spend an entire year traveling around the world. And of course it talks about all the crazy situations that they get themselves into, the amazing people that they meet. If you're looking for something to sort of get away with and follow their story, this is the kind of book you'd want to pick up. Second is Grounded. It's a guy and his girlfriend, and they decide to travel around the world without using a plane, so grounded, not flying. And they use trains and boats and anything else as long as it's not flying. Of course, that can be very tough in some places to get from one place to another without a plane, but it also, of course, provides for a really, really good story. Then lastly, there's A Year in the Merde. This is now part of a series by a guy who decided to move to France. He had job stuff that he was doing there too, but since he's not a Frenchman, it's his hilarious perspective on the French attitude, and of course there's sort of a thing that the French are mean and they don't really like anybody else who doesn't speak French and whatnot, but and he obviously isn't that person, so his interactions with those French people and him writing about it makes for a good travel book. I also don't own any of these because I have borrowed them either from the library or from other people to read. The first is Mouse. This is about World War II, told from the perspective of mice being the people and cats being the Nazis, and this father is sort of telling his son about his time during World War II, and I think it was just an excellent way to tell a story like that in a different format, so maybe other people would enjoy it. So those who don't like reading big thick books about the history of a war, they would read this graphic novel and learn something new. Second is Persepolis. It's written by a woman about her time in Iran during the revolution and the oppression that has been put on women. How they used to be able to go to school and dress how they wanted, and then suddenly new people came in and told them that they couldn't dress how they wanted. They had to completely cover their bodies, and people were persecuted with basically no reason. I know a lot of people have read this book, so I'm sure a lot of you know how moving it is. Lastly is, of course, Watchmen. How can you not mention this book in graphic novels unless you really, really hate it? But it was the first real graphic novel that I ever read, and I just think it's so dark and it really sticks with you. The book just has this sort of feel to it that when you read it, you want to keep reading, but you're also sort of terrified about what might happen. Honestly, I need to read more of these, or at least I need to read more of these that I actually like. The one book that I do have for this category is Lucky by Alice Sebold. She's the same one who wrote The Lovely Bones. The Lovely Bones is about a rape of a young girl. She was raped herself, and this is a book about what happened, and it is told in great detail. It's a really gut-wrenching book about the rape, the trial, and how she deals with it years later. I also have a review of this book on our channel, so if you want more details about it, feel free to check that out. So that concludes my genre exploration. Thank you for sticking with me all the way to the end. That was a lot of books to talk about and a lot of books to actually gather up. If you want to make a video response, definitely do that. Make sure you match it up with Laraine Brotista's video. If you don't make videos, you can share some of your favorite books from different genres down below in the comments. As always, in the doobly-doo, you can find links to our Twitter and our Goodreads and our book depository, amongst other things. Check those out if you feel so inclined. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you later.